I walked into the boutique auction gallery completely confused. My mother Diane had sent me the address with no explanation, just come see something special. The space was elegant, dimly lit, filled with well-dressed people holding champagne glasses. Then I saw them, my childhood memories displayed like museum artifacts, my finger paintings from elementary school professionally framed, my father's baseball glove in a glass case, his handwritten notes to me mounted on cream paper. My throat closed. "That's mine," I whispered, moving closer to a painting I'd made at age 7. Diane appeared beside me, smiling at the crowd like I'd just played my part in some performance. "Surprise," she said brightly. My confusion turned to horror as I realized what was happening. She was selling my childhood, without asking, without permission, without shame. "It's not like you were using them," Diane said when I pulled her aside, my voice shaking with rage. "They were just sitting in storage. This is a beautiful way to honor your father's memory." The gallery owner approached, thinking I was part of the promotional event. Photographers snapped pictures of me standing next to my own artwork. I couldn't breathe. I stormed toward the exit as the crowd actually applauded, thinking my distress was theatrical emotion. Outside, I leaned against the cold brick wall, trying not to vomit. One image burned in my mind. My father's handwriting on a tag next to his glove. "To my Willa, my artist." He'd written that note for me when I was 12, not for strangers to buy. Diane had taken something sacred and turned it into merchandise, and she'd ambushed me with it publicly. I called the auction house the next morning, hands shaking. The curator sounded confused. "Yes, Miss Foster, your mother submitted the collection, but we need your signature to complete the sale. You're listed as co-owner on several items." My breath caught. She couldn't legally sell without my permission? "The collection has gone viral online," the curator continued. "We're getting inquiries from major collectors. Your mother has been quite persistent about expediting the paperwork." I hung up and stared at my phone. Diane's fraud wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was legally questionable. And now she desperately needed me to sign off on her scheme. The power dynamic had just shifted. For the first time in my relationship with my mother, I held all the cards. The question was what I'd do with them. Diane showed up at my apartment that evening without calling first. "I didn't think you'd care about some old school projects," she said, not apologizing, just explaining. Like my feelings were unreasonable. I was 16 again suddenly, small, unseen, voiceless. Just after Dad died, I'd poured myself into painting. Grief translated into color and canvas. Diane had called it morbid and attention-seeking. She'd thrown herself into redecorating and dating, erasing Dad's presence from our house within months. When I'd protested, she told me I was being dramatic. "You need to move on," she'd said. But she'd kept his things in storage, not for memory, for profit. "These pieces could sell for thousands," Diane continued now. "I'll split it with you, 60-40. She actually expected me to be grateful, to help her monetize my grief and childhood. "No," I said clearly, "I'm not signing anything." Diane's mask cracked immediately. Her face went red. "You're ruining everything, again." That word, again, like I'd been a disappointment my entire life. "You're just like your father, stubborn, selfish. He filled your head with nonsense about being special." Her voice turned vicious. "You're not special, Willa. You're ordinary. And you're throwing away real money because of some emotional tantrum." I stood up, opened my door, and pointed outside. "Leave." She stared at me, shocked. I'd never stood up to her like this, never chosen myself over keeping peace. "You'll regret this," she hissed, grabbing her purse. I closed the door behind her, then leaned against it, shaking but empowered. For the first time in my life, I'd said no to Diane, and survived. The family group chat exploded within hours. Diane had spun her narrative beautifully. "Willa is being so dramatic about a lovely tribute to her father. I don't understand why she's trying to sabotage this beautiful memorial." Cousins I barely spoke to started texting me. "Why are you being so ungrateful? Your mom worked so hard on this. You're acting like a narcissist." My Aunt Georgia called it a beautiful way to share your father's legacy with the world. Nobody asked how I felt. Nobody questioned Diane's version of events. Nobody wondered if maybe, just maybe, the person whose childhood was being sold might have a valid reason to object. I turned off my phone and sat in the dark, realizing that my entire extended family had chosen Diane's lies over my reality. The betrayal was comprehensive and crushing. During brunch with an old friend the next week, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Two women at the next table were discussing my father's funeral. Diane handled it so well, one said, though I heard her daughter was unstable afterward and she had to protect her from making a scene. My friend saw my face and squeezed my hand. I'd wanted to give a eulogy at Dad's funeral. Diane had told me no. "You're too emotional right now," she'd said. "Let me handle the speaking." I thought she was protecting me from public grief. Now I understood. She told everyone I was unstable so I wouldn't speak, so she could control the narrative. Diane hadn't just stolen my childhood artifacts, she'd stolen my grief, my voice, my right to honor my father publicly. Everything clicked into place. Diane showed up at my workplace a week later, uninvited, carrying pastries and wearing a forced smile. My coworkers whispered as she cornered me by the break room. "Just sign the paperwork, sweetie. I'll give you 20% of the sales. That's fair, right?" She tried to make it sound generous, like she was doing me a favor. I looked at her carefully, this woman who'd birthed me but never really seen me, who'd erased my father and monetized my pain, who told everyone I was unstable to silence me. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to burn her down with anger or confrontation. I was going to let her destroy herself with her own greed and lies. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply stepping back and letting someone face the natural consequences of their own behavior. "I'll think about it," I lied smoothly. She left satisfied. She had no idea what was coming. I contacted the gallery curator directly, identifying myself as the actual artist and rightful owner of the work. I brought my father's original notes to me, photographs of me creating the pieces, and documentation proving my age and ownership. The curator's face went white as she reviewed everything. "Your mother represented these as family heirlooms she had full rights to sell," she said carefully. "This changes everything legally." The auction was canceled immediately. Then the curator made an offer that surprised me. "Would you consider a personal showcase of your work? Your story is compelling. Your art is genuinely moving." I didn't say yes immediately. I needed time to think. But for the first time, someone was offering me control over my own narrative, my own work, my own voice. That felt powerful in a way I hadn't expected. A lawyer's letter arrived at my apartment 3 days later. Diane was threatening to sue me for defamation and interference with business opportunities. I read it twice, then called a friend who was an attorney. She reviewed the documents and laughed. "Your mother signed contracts claiming guardianship rights over an adult's property. That's fraud. And threatening to sue you for telling the truth about ownership? That's a weak case designed to intimidate." I drafted one email in response, CCing Diane's lawyer. "I welcome the opportunity to present all evidence of ownership and fraud in court. Please proceed with filing." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Diane had always used the threat of conflict to control me. This time, I was calling her bluff. Let's go to court. Let's make everything public. I wasn't afraid anymore. While searching through storage boxes at my apartment, I found something I thought was lost forever, my old art journal from high school. The leather was worn, pages yellowed. I'd looked for this for years. Diane had told me she'd accidentally thrown it out during a move. But here it was, buried in a box she'd given me of random junk when I'd moved out. Inside was a letter from my father, tucked into the back pages. His handwriting made my eyes burn. "You're the artist in this family, Willa. Never let anyone steal your light. Keep painting, keep creating, keep being exactly who you are." He'd written it 2 weeks before he died. I sat on my floor and cried for an hour. Then I smiled. It was time to reclaim everything she'd tried to erase. My boss noticed I was distracted during a project meeting. She pulled me aside afterward, concerned. "Is everything okay? You seem stressed." I hesitated, then opened up about the situation. My boss listened quietly, then shared her own story. Her mother had tried to sabotage her wedding because she couldn't stand not being the center of attention. "Narcissistic parents make you think you're crazy for having boundaries," she said, "but you're not. Trust yourself." That conversation changed something fundamental in me. I wasn't alone in this. I wasn't overreacting. Other people had survived similar betrayals and rebuilt their lives. My boss gave me 2 weeks of flexible scheduling to handle family matters. I used that time strategically to build my case, to plan my showcase, to reclaim my story publicly. I posted on social media identifying myself as the artist behind the controversial childhood exhibit. I explained everything calmly: how my mother had tried to sell my work without permission, how she told family I was being dramatic when I objected, how the items included my late father's personal notes to me. The post went viral within hours. Thousands of comments from people sharing similar stories. Art collectors reaching out about future work. Media outlets requesting interviews, gallery offers. Support from complete strangers who understood narcissistic family dynamics. Diane's fraud became public record. Her reputation as the grieving widow honoring her late husband crumbled. Now everyone knew the truth. She wasn't honoring him. She was profiting from my pain while silencing my voice. The narrative had shifted completely. Aunt Georgia asked to meet for coffee a week later. She claimed she understood now after seeing everything unfolded publicly. "I should have listened to you," she said, looking genuinely remorseful. We talked for an hour about family dynamics and Diane's behavior. Then Georgia said something that made everything finally make sense. "Your mother always resented how close you were to your father. She used to say he loved you more than her." She paused. "I think that's what this has always been about: jealousy." I sat back, processing this revelation. Every dismissal, every cruelty, every attempt to erase me. It had all been driven by jealousy of a child's relationship with her father. Diane hadn't been protecting me or honoring Dad. She'd been punishing me for being loved by him. That realization was painful but clarifying. Diane showed up at the gallery's follow-up preview event uninvited. I was speaking with the curator when she burst through the door, her face red with rage. "This is all lies," she shouted at the small crowd. "I'm her mother. I'm the real inspiration behind her art." A local arts reporter was filming. Diane ranted for 3 minutes about how I was ungrateful, how she'd sacrificed everything, how I was tarnishing my father's memory. The curator asked her to leave. Security escorted her out while she screamed about suing everyone. The video was online within an hour. Comments poured in. "Toxic mom of the year. This is textbook narcissistic behavior. That daughter deserves better." Diane had destroyed her own credibility more effectively than I ever could have. Sometimes people just need enough rope to hang themselves publicly. A private collector reached out through the gallery. One of my paintings, a piece I'd created at 15, had surfaced at a garage sale Diane had held when I was away at college. The collector had bought it for $5. Now, seeing my story online, he wanted to return it. He was offering $50,000 for the piece, but wanted me to have first option to buy it back. I was stunned. "She told me she donated everything to charity," I said. The collector shook his head. "She sold dozens of items. I recognized your signature from the news coverage." I bought the painting back anonymously through a trust. The collector refused payment, just asked me to sign it properly and date it. "Your work deserves to be credited to you," he said. It was hanging in my apartment by that evening, reclaimed. Diane appeared on a local mom podcast, clearly unhinged. I listened to the episode at my friend's insistence. "Willa's art is just a cry for attention," Diane said. "She's always been dramatic. And this whole funeral thing, she's exaggerating. I protected her from making a scene." She sounded unstable, bitter. The podcast host seemed uncomfortable, trying to redirect the conversation, but Diane kept spiraling, making herself look worse with every sentence. The comment section destroyed her. "This woman needs help. Imagine being so jealous of your own daughter." The daughter should get a restraining order. The podcast issued an apology statement, calling the episode a mistake in judgment. Diane's public image was in ruins, and I hadn't said a single negative word about her. Her own mouth had done all the damage. I accepted the gallery's showcase offer with one condition. The exhibit would be called Things I Wasn't Allowed to Keep. Each piece would include a card explaining the story, how it was created, how it was taken, how it was nearly sold without my knowledge. The gallery agreed immediately. The opening night was packed. Visitors walked through in silence, many crying. Art critics called it devastatingly honest and a powerful meditation on family erasure. The exhibit became a phenomenon. News outlets covered it, psychology blogs analyzed it, survivor support groups shared it. I'd turned my private pain into public art that resonated with thousands of people who'd experienced similar betrayals. Diane had tried to sell my story. Instead, I'd shared it on my own terms, and people were listening. Diane sued again, this time for emotional distress and damage to reputation. Her lawyer sent threatening letters about my public statements. I countersued for fraud, misrepresentation, exploitation of a deceased person's legacy, and attempted theft of intellectual property. My lawyer was confident. She's suing you for telling the truth. That's not a winning strategy. The press was watching now. Articles detailed the legal battle. Public opinion was overwhelmingly on my side. Diane's lawyer quietly reached out about settling. They wanted to drop everything if I'd remove the exhibit. I refused. The exhibit stays. The truth stays public. If your client drops her lawsuit, I'll consider dropping my counterclaim. They folded within a week. Diane withdrew everything. She'd finally lost a fight with me, and it had cost her far more than money. It had cost her her reputation. The family group chat, which had been full of attacks against me months earlier, changed completely. Relatives started posting apologies. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to your side. I wish I'd seen her behavior sooner." One cousin wrote a long message. "I watched that podcast and finally understood. You were telling the truth all along. I'm sorry I didn't believe you." Diane was suddenly isolated. No one defended her anymore. Her toxic behavior was now undeniable and public. She'd controlled the family narrative for decades through manipulation and lies. But once the truth was visible, once people saw her behavior documented and witnessed, they couldn't unsee it. She'd lost her power, lost her allies, lost her ability to make me the villain. The queen of the family group chat had been dethroned. By her own actions. Diane's house went into foreclosure 6 months later. Legal fees, settlement costs, and her damaged reputation had destroyed her financially. The property went up for auction. Through a silent buyer arranged by my lawyer, I purchased it anonymously. Then I donated it to a women's art cooperative for use as a community studio space. Artists who'd been silenced or dismissed could create there freely. Diane would never know I'd bought it. She'd moved in with Aunt Georgia, bitter and diminished. But the house where she'd erased my father and controlled my childhood was now a space for healing and creation. That felt like the perfect transformation. Beauty built from ashes. Art created from pain. Women supported instead of silenced. Everything Diane had never been to me. Diane sent one final email. The subject line was empty. The message read, "I raised you better than this." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I moved the email into a folder I'd created specifically for her messages. I titled it, "Proof I Survived." I never responded, never acknowledged, never engaged. Silence, I'd learned, was the most powerful response to someone who thrived on conflict and attention. Diane wanted a reaction, wanted to provoke me into anger or guilt. I gave her nothing, just empty space where her voice used to control me. That folder became a testament, not to what she'd done to me, but to what I'd survived, what I'd overcome, what I'd built from the ruins of her cruelty. I was done letting her words define my reality. The final piece of the exhibit went on display 3 months later. My father's letter, the one I'd found in the journal, was framed and mounted with proper museum lighting. Visitors stopped in front of it, many crying openly. "You're the artist in this family. Never let anyone steal your light." His handwriting, his love, his belief in me. News outlets covered the edition. Human interest stories, art magazines, psychology journals analyzing family dynamics and healing. I did interviews about grief, creativity, and reclaiming your voice after abuse. My father's words became a rallying cry for people who'd been silenced. His legacy wasn't what Diane had tried to sell. It was the daughter he'd believed in, the artist he'd encouraged, the voice he'd told to never be silent. That was his real legacy. And that couldn't be sold. I was interviewed on a national morning show 6 months after the exhibit opened, sitting in the studio, makeup perfect, completely calm. I told my story clearly. The host asked if I'd forgiven my mother. I paused, choosing my words carefully. This isn't about forgiveness or revenge. It's about reclaiming what was taken and using my voice after years of being silenced. It's about the thousands of daughters who'd experienced similar betrayals. I looked directly at the camera. We're not just healing individually, we're building community, supporting each other, creating spaces where silenced voices can finally speak. That's bigger than one person's cruelty. That's systemic change. The segment went viral. Support groups used it in healing sessions. Therapists shared it with clients. I'd turned personal pain into collective empowerment. That felt like winning. I recorded a final voiceover for the documentary being made about the exhibit. Sitting in the gallery, surrounded by my reclaimed childhood, I spoke directly to the camera. My mother tried to sell my childhood. She tried to monetize my grief and silence my voice. She wanted to control the narrative, to profit from my pain, to erase my father's true legacy. I paused, looking at the artwork surrounding me. In the end, all she did was set it free. She forced me to reclaim my story publicly, to find my voice, to build community with others who'd been silenced. I smiled. I didn't need to burn the house down. I just needed to outgrow it. And that's exactly what I did. The documentary ended with visitors streaming through the exhibit, finding their own stories reflected in mine, healing together, speaking together, free.